Appreciate you all being here this morning to worship the Lord. Especially want to give a welcome to our visitors. I appreciate your courage. It takes a lot of courage to come in amongst a bunch of people you don't know and wonder how you'll be treated. So we welcome you, and we hope that you're glad so far that you've come today. And by the way, if there's any question that you have, you see us doing or saying anything, any question you've got, don't fail to ask somebody. We love for people to ask about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So, Abraham, Genesis chapter 22. Let's read it together, see what this is all about. It came about after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. He said, Take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and he split wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham raised his eyes and saw the place from a distance. Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go over there, and we will worship and return to you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. So the 2 of them walked on together. Then they came to the place of which God had told him, and Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood and bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Do not stretch out your hand against the lad, and do nothing to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And then Abraham raised his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the place of his son. Abraham called the name of that place, The Lord will provide, as it is to this day. In the mount of the Lord, it will be provided. Verse 15 says, The angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven, and he said, By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only son. Indeed, I will greatly bless you, and I will greatly multiply your seed as the stars of the heavens and as the sand which is on the seashore. And your seed shall possess the gate of their enemies. In your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. If you were to take a piece of paper and read through this and number all the things that you thought, this is kind of strange, this is kind of odd, how many things would you have put down on that piece of paper? God calls Abraham and he says, I want you to offer up your son as a burnt offering. Now, what son's he talking about? He's talking about Isaac. Well, tell me about Isaac. Isaac was the son that God had promised Abraham. And how long had Abraham and Sarah waited for Isaac to be born? 25 years. When God told them they were going to have a son, Sarah was 75. And it was 25 years. I'm sorry, Abraham was 75. Sarah was only 65. Sounds good, doesn't it? Only 65. Yeah, I'm soaking that in, boy. But when Isaac was born, Abraham was 100. It was 25 years later, and now the boy's old enough to carry wood up on a mountain. It doesn't say how old he is, but he's old enough to do that. That's what it says happened. I find it interesting when God tells him this, what does Abraham do? The very next day, early in the morning, he gets up and he starts splitting wood. He makes preparations and he gets his young men together and he goes. He doesn't try to talk God out of it. You remember, this is the guy when God said to Abraham, I'm going to wipe out Sodom and Gomorrah. What did Abraham do? He said, Lord, what? Just per se, say I could find 50 righteous people down there. Would you spare the town? God said, yeah, you find 50 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah, I will spare the town. And Abraham said, well, Lord, if I might presume upon your patience, what if I just found 40? You know how that went. You go back and you can read it. How far down does he come? If I can find 10 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah, I won't destroy the town. And he didn't find 10. But this is the guy who kind of bargains with God, but there's no bargaining here. Abraham doesn't say, wait, what? This is the boy that you promised me, and we waited 25 years, and now he's grown to this point in time, and you're telling me you want me to sacrifice him as a burnt offering? But then you go to that text that Jace read for us in Hebrews chapter 11. What was Abraham thinking? Abraham was thinking, well, that's all right. I shouldn't have had this boy anyway. God gave him to me miraculously, and if he wants to raise him from the dead, that's what Hebrews says Abraham was thinking God could raise him from the dead. And then it says in a figure, he received him back from the dead. This was a man of faith, of strong faith. How long did it take him to get where they were going for the sacrifice? It took 3 days. And there's no record of God having to answer Abraham's questions on the way about this. Abraham, he just got ready and he went 3 days, and he gets there and what does he tell the young man? He says, you wait here. Me and the lad are going to go worship. And then what did he say? And then we will return. Look at verse 5. Now, I can't tell you what Abraham was thinking, but I can tell you what the Holy Spirit had put in the book. Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go over there, and we will worship and return to you. Do you think Abraham was lying when he said that? I'm just deceiving these guys because I know my son, he's not coming. No, I don't think he was. Abraham had a view for the future that was in keeping with what God had already told him. He didn't give up on that view, that this was a promised son through whom God was going to bless the whole world. And he repeats that at the end of this again. And so Abraham had that truth in mind. And so he goes on ahead. How valuable is that kind of faith? Even when you're faced with something that other people would look at, what do you mean? It's, well, the Lord gave him to me in the first place, and he can take him and give him back to me if that's what he wants me to do. I just know I'm following the Lord. That seemed to be Abraham's mindset the whole time. And that's what ought to be my mindset and your mindset, don't you think? God is the one we trust. So he takes him up there, prepares the altar, prepares the wood, puts Isaac on the wood, ready to slay him, grabs the knife, and the angel says, hold on, don't do that. And we look down there in verse 13. Abraham raised his eyes, and he looked, and behold, there was a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. Abraham took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering. How's it say it? In the place of his son. Now, what are we seeing here? Kind of like a preview of what's coming down the pike a couple thousand years later. We're seeing God offering up his son freely, and his son going willingly. It's interesting, there's no part of the text that lets us in on the idea that Isaac ever struggled against this. Jesus never fought against the will of the Father to be sacrificed for us. With Isaac, there was a substitute, though. Isaac didn't have to die because God provided a lamb. Isn't that what Abraham had said? God will provide the lamb. I don't know what Abraham was thinking when he said that, but that was his mindset, that God would provide. And so when God did provide, what did Abraham call the name of that place? The Lord provides. The Lord provides. Don't we have some interesting names for towns and localities here in Oklahoma? I mean, you think about some of the names that places have got. Somebody once asked me, said, how did that go? If Henrietta fell in Stillwater, who'd pull her out? You don't know? Winnie would. What was the other one? Henrietta's in all of it. Said, Sally saw Henrietta's bow legs. What other funny names do we? We've got strange names for places. Where I grew up in southern West Virginia, not too far from where I lived, there was a place called Slippery Gut. I know, it's a strange name, Slippery Gut. And the story circulated, oh yeah, that's because there were a couple of guys that stole a hog, and they carried it off in the woods, and they were butchering the thing, and the police caught them, and they tried to run away, and they slipped on the guts, and that's why that place is called Slippery Gut. Wrong. The word gut was an old word used for creek. And so they found the creek with slippery banks, and they said, let's just call it Slippery Creek is what that really means, Slippery Gut. So, all kinds of things can arise. But this was a place with a legitimate name for a legitimate historical situation that took place. And you don't have to go to this place to know that its name is true. Wherever you are, wherever you live, the name of that place is the Lord provides. When you wake up in the morning, where are you? You are where the Lord provides. Every day of our lives, we are where the Lord provides. This is an account of something that happened on the other side of the world for us, but it tells us a truth that happens every day in my life and in yours. The Lord provides. He's always done it. He always will, I believe. When you think about what he says here, Abraham had in mind that there was a plan, and that's something we need to understand. God has a plan to bless me and to bless you, and we know nothing about his plan. Well, we know what he's revealed in the scriptures about Jesus and the gospel and all that. But what about tomorrow? We're talking about the plan for the rest of my life and your life. What's going to happen tomorrow? Who knows? God have a plan for that? He had a plan for Abraham. Has he got a plan for you? I think he does. When I read Proverbs chapter 16, this is a passage, it's like, it's just an old passage in Proverbs, but you think about what Solomon is saying here. Solomon, by the way, what does the Bible tell us about Solomon? Wiser than any other man who had ever lived. And where did he get his wisdom? God gave it to him. That man says here in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9. I know I've talked about this before. I like to talk about it because it's so pertinent to my life and yours every day. The mind of man plans his way. Amen. But the Lord directs his steps. What a comfort that is if you trust the Lord. If you trust the Lord, that's a great comfort. I make my plans. I know what I intend to do when this lesson is over and when our assembly is over. I'm hoping to eat. I've got a plan to eat. Who doesn't have a plan to eat? You can raise your hand, but I don't believe you. I think you're a liar. We plan to eat, don't we? And then earlier I remembered something I need to run up to Walmart to get, so I'm planning to go to Walmart because I love to walk around Walmart on Sunday afternoon. Just planning, that's my plan. And then later on this afternoon, we've got an elders meeting. After the elders meeting, we've got a worship assembly at 5 o'clock. I'm planning, Lord willing, I'm going to preach at 5 o'clock. And then after that, we're having the dinner and Devo. It's a busy day. We got plans. Are we going to be able to fulfill those plans? Didn't Hal do a great job this morning? Lead us in the Lord's Supper? What if this was my last communion? What if I don't make it to Walmart? Lord, have a plan for my life? I've got plans, but he is the one who directs my steps. And if you think about it, would you have it any other way? What better arrangement could you have than the God of the universe directing your life? We put ourselves in his hands and he says, hey, Marty. And what should Marty say? Marty should say like Abraham said. What did Abraham say? Here I am. Here I am, Lord. Who else said that? Do you remember? It was Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah. But he didn't say it at first. What did Isaiah say before he said, here I am? You remember? He said, woe is me. Isaiah had a vision and he found himself in the throne room of God and he was in the presence of God as his angels. And Isaiah said, woe is me because I'm a man of unclean lips and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. You can read about this in Isaiah chapter 6. And God from his throne directed an angel to take a hot coal from the altar. And he took that coal over and he touched Isaiah's lips. And it didn't hurt Isaiah. What did it do? In that dream, in that vision, it cleansed him. And after Isaiah was cleansed, that's when he said, here I am, send me. There was Abraham, had a relationship with God, strong relationship, had that relationship for years, for decades. God says, Abraham. Abraham says, here I am. And in the end, Abraham would say, the Lord provides. Even when you think he might be asking you something that you could never do, do it. Do it. Give yourself over to it, and you'll get back more than you ever thought. God's got a plan that will bless you, and you don't know anything about it. And I don't know anything about it, but it's coming. It's unfolding as we speak. And it'll unfold the rest of today, and it'll unfold for you and me tomorrow. It'll unfold the rest of this week. God's got a plan for us. He's working it out. I believe that with everything in me. Else, how could he say in Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And when it says all things work together for good, you know that includes the good things. The good things work together for good. Well, duh, but saying all means even the things that we would consider bad work together for good. How can you beat that? When the bad things, God says, I'm going to make them work together for your good. That's the way I do it. That's the way he did it with Abraham. He was old. We think of that as being bad, but in Abraham's old age, God says, I'm going to give you a son. By the way, I'm going to wait until you're 25 years older, but God always does things in a way that we wouldn't think he normally would. Abraham couldn't foresee this. He thought he would get he thought he would get Isaac, how? Back from the dead, but Isaac never died, never went that far. We might have a vision of how we think things are going to turn out, and they'll turn out good because God will make them turn out good, but it may not be according to our vision. It might not be according to what we thought. Has God always done things in your life the way you thought he would? When does he ever do that? He's always got something better than what I would think. And you won't be able to figure out what he's going to do. Sometimes I find that a little frustrating. And the reason I find it frustrating is because of my weak faith. I don't want to wait to find out, Lord. I want to know. Don't make me wait to see. And what does Isaiah say over and over and over again? As Isaiah writes, the prophet, those who wait upon the Lord, what will they do? They'll renew their strength. They'll mount up with wings like eagles. Wait, wait, wait on the Lord. God's ways, man, just so far outstrip ours. There's an interesting passage in Ecclesiastes. Oh, I'm going back to Solomon again, aren't I? Solomon's got some pretty good things to say. I don't know if you've noticed that or not. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. This is verses 13 and 14. And as free men, we might find this a challenge. But as disciples with faith in God, willingly embrace this because this is exactly the way we would want it. Solomon says this in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Consider the work of God, for who is able to straighten what he has bent? In the day of prosperity, be happy. But in the day of adversity, consider, God has made the one as well as the other, so that man will not discover anything that will be after him. We will not be able to figure it out. That is by design. So what do? Trust God for it. You trust God for it. And that's what Solomon's conclusion was at the end of Ecclesiastes. Here's the whole of man. Do what? Fear God and keep his commandments. Because man, that'll put you instead. It's like, I remember a comedian. He was talking about the dumb signs that you see from time to time in places. And that was his whole shtick, and it was hilarious. And he talked about being on an airplane. And the emergency door has a sign on it. Do you know what that sign says on the door? Because I've seen it myself several times on several different airplanes. You know what it says? It says, do not open in flight. Duh. He said, you know why they have that sign on there? He said, because sometime in the past, some nut has said to his wife, honey, I'll be back in a minute. Well, man, that's funny, but that's about the way it is. You don't open the door on a jet airplane when you're 30,000 feet in the air. By the way, how far is 30,000 feet? You do the math. That's a few miles up in the air. How far would you have to fall before you even got to where there was oxygen to breathe? Now, these are dumb questions, I know, but I'm trying to make a point. When you're riding with the Lord, don't open the door to get out. When you're riding with the Lord, stay put. Buckle that seatbelt. Stay in. Don't you let anybody talk you out of leaving where the Lord has put you. You stay faithful to him always. Do not leave the Lord's flock. Be one of his faithful sheep. You be as close to the shepherd as you can, and he'll put you to work doing some good stuff. You may not even see it while you're doing it, but when it's all over, some way, somehow, you'll be able to look back and, oh man, I didn't even know I was working for the Lord, but I was. That's the way it works all the time. We think life is in all the big stuff, but it's not in the big stuff. Life, the reality of life, and faith is in the little stuff every day, of kindnesses, of compliments, of encouragements, of speaking truth that's sometimes hard truth that needs to be heard. It's in being faithful to go to work and fulfill for your employer what you've committed to fulfill for your employer. It's in going to school and sitting down under the authority of your teachers and being respectful. It's all of these kinds of things that might seem mundane, but these are the things of life. And as I read the scriptures, these are part of God's plan for us. All of them together. You won't be able to figure out God's plan, but it's going to do you good. And when you're done, God will see your faith. But who else will see your faith? You will see your faith. Have you ever done something and you didn't know you could do that? But you did it. And maybe you won't be able to do it every time, but you did it once and you look back to that. Wow, I did it. I should have brought my little pine cone in. I've got a little pine cone. I was out in the woods one day, and I was way off from this little pine cone hanging on the end of a pine limb, and I had my bow, and I thought, I wonder if I could hit that pine cone. Because back at the house, I've got 3 stacked bales of straw and a target, and sometimes I miss all 3 stacked bales of straw. So here I'm out in the woods, and I see that little pine cone. I'm going to see if I can hit that. Rear back. I hit the pine cone. Now, if you have an understanding, you don't have to ask, Marty, why do you still have that pine cone? Because one time, That one time, that's a memory that I will always have and I'll always cherish because I hit right where I was aiming. Doesn't happen often in life, does it? But it does happen from time to time. And you don't have to hit that specific. You can hit to a point where you know this is where God wants me to be, even if I'm doing it as a weak, feeble human being. I'm still doing it. And when you're done, you will know that you've done it out of faith. That's what you'll know. Now it says God saw his faith in Genesis 22, but reading between the lines, I'm thinking, wow, what was that like for Abraham? What did he know when he came down off that mountain? Abraham knew, wow, I was willing to kill my son for God. How much did that increase his faith? This son that God promised me, that doesn't seem like he would ever ask me to give him up, but he did, and all the time God knew, I'm not really going to let him. It was a test. You know what a test is? We might think of a test as a temptation, but a test and a temptation are different. A temptation is when you're trying to get somebody to do evil, but a test is when you're giving somebody the opportunity to do right. That's the way it works in school, isn't it? You go to class, and then the teacher gives you a test, and the test is not for you to do bad. No, we do bad because we don't answer the right. But the test is the opportunity to show how much you know. It's the opportunity to get right answers. That's what a test is all about. This was a test for Abraham. You and I get tested. But when the test is over, not only God sees our faith, but we see our faith. Who else sees our faith? We don't know. But answer me this. Have you ever been encouraged by seeing someone else go through a struggle with faith? Have you ever been built up by seeing someone endure difficulty and hardship, whether it's financial or whether it's health, whatever it might be? You see them going through that and they're bearing up and they're keeping their faith, and by doing that you are encouraged that their faith, and you're motivated to keep going. Why did God put this in the book? Was it so that we would glorify Abraham? We admire him for what he did. But I think he put it in the book so that we could see that when his faith was tested, he came out on top, and you and I can and will do that as well. This morning, as this lesson closes, I don't know where your faith is, but I want you to know that the Lord will provide. He's provided salvation through Jesus Christ, and he provides for us in the details from day to day. And wherever you are, whatever your struggles might be, the one main thing you've got to deal with in life is your sin. And if you can get your sin dealt with, everything else is small potatoes. And I love small potatoes. Where are you today? We're going to stand and sing a song of encouragement and invitation. If you'd like to become a Christian today by being baptized into Jesus Christ after confessing your faith in him, or if you'd like to have this congregation pray for you, if you've got any kind of a need whatsoever, you got questions, we'd like to hear them. Just come forward as we stand this invitation song together, and we'll do everything we can to help. Let's stand and sing.